Hi, everyone. This is Jen from Jen Yen Metamorphosis Mentoring. And today I have a special, beautiful woman right here with me. Her name is Lisa DeLong. And we've actually got to know each other since last year. I think it was on the path of becoming shamanic healers and also the energy medicine practitioner together. And that's how we knew each other. And today I'm so honored to invite you to join me in this authenticity project with me. And how do I even introduce you? Because I know you have many hats you wear. So you are a published author. Or look at your book over there, Beloved Brothers. If I'm not wrong, it's a required reading for many nursing students in school, right?
Yeah.
It's written back in 2011. And we're going to share much more later. Okay. Yeah. And you are a mom of 4.
Yes.
You are a ballroom dancer. Yes. You are a registered nurse, of course, cannabis practices, right?
Cannabis, yes.
Yes. What else? Am I missing out? Your speaker, of course. You're a storyteller. So yes. Bring it on, Lisa. Would love to hear from you. Because I know there are so many things happening in your life. There's like powerful life experiences of, I would say, loss. And we as human, as you know, we're all going through that sooner or later. And for you, it's like a very, I would say, astonishing, shocking moments for you to experience in life. And oh my gosh, I totally would love for you to share the part of you that, kind of like fast going backwards to 2000, was it 2000?
Yes.
And when your first son just didn't, his lifetime, make a call on him, and he has to leave planet Earth. And I would love for you to just share this part of the story or onwards with everyone here.
Absolutely. And just so you know, he's very present right now. It's just, I'm definitely feeling him supporting this conversation. And that doesn't always happen.
Oh, wow.
So it's been happening more and more often as I be coming into more of my shamanic practices. As we've been studying it, and we know that the more we practice, the more intuitive we become, and the more mediumship aspects of us being human start to come up too. But that really started for me back in 2000 when Justin was in the ICU. He was 15 years old and he had relapsed from leukemia. He was originally diagnosed when he was 5. So he was in remission almost 10 years when he relapsed. And so I was in the ICU sitting next to him the night before he passed, and I dreamt his passing. I dreamt that I stood at the door and I yelled 3 times to let him go. And then the next day, about 12 hours later, that exact scenario that I had seen in a dream played out in real life, in physical. And at that time, I was, Justin is my firstborn. So my other children were 10. Jessica was 10 years old. Joelle was 6. And Jacob, my youngest, was only 9 months old. So this was a very tumultuous time. It was a very shocking time to have all this happening. But that dream, as I started to understand what physical death really was, because I didn't really know. And this is the way we are as human beings. We think we know what it's like when someone we love dies, or their body dies, or if for us as well. We think we understand it, have a grasp of it. But we really don't know what it means until someone very close to us, someone we love, leaves physical. And we have very little training in it in the Western world. We have very little, we are Americans. We get people better, and we don't have a lot of grief awareness. We don't have a lot of compassion for grieving people.
I think it's all around the world.
Yeah.
Modern world, yes.
It is a very modern world, and we think of this is the other thing I love about the shamanic path is that we honor death as we honor birth,
Yes.
and that feels so much more appropriate to, and that's really the way I've lived my life. You know, as I look back, the whole reason I was attracted to becoming a nurse had to do with my curiosity around death. I wasn't afraid of it. You
Mhm.
know, I remember reading a horrible book when I was in junior high. It was Helter Skelter about Charles Manson and murder and all this. I
Oh,
was like 13 and I was so curious. And I should have known then I would end up being a shaman, you know, like, tell me more about this death thing. And terrible. Anyway, that I digress there, but really and truly, that moment in time with Justin is what cracked me open to my spiritual receptivity. Because in the early days of fresh grief, and
mm,
I mean, for anyone who's watching this and is in fresh grief, please be gentle with yourself and take everything that I'm sharing here with the understanding that that was 20 years ago for me.
mm.
And that I've done a lot of work around grief. I have attended to my grief. And much of that has been in spiritual practice. And the transformation that occurred during those first weeks and months of adjusting to life with Justin out of physical.
Mm.
You know, he was in my body. I mean, I gave birth to him. And that kind of loss, I couldn't, you can't even name it. You can't even say what it's like. There's a numbness that happens when it's someone you love that closely. And so that dream that I had was pivotal in my healing and in my process. And it took years. It did not happen overnight. But every time I got to the lowest points of my grief experience, praying to God to let me die in my sleep, the pain was so severe. All of us were, my husband, my other kids, we were all feeling the same thing. You know, we would talk about it years later, but at the time we were all wishing to be on the other side, praying for that ability to connect with Justin,
Mm.
not knowing that we had that ability in us already, because the religious training that I'd had from childhood was mediumship is scary and dangerous. It's you don't dabble in that.
Right.
I was taught to fear it. And here I was having a profound uh, clairvoyant experience of dreaming this whole event happening and then seeing it and being able to replay it in my mind over and over again. That the whole thing, you know, it was like that is a form of mediumship when you can connect with spirit
Yes.
through your own energy field. I didn't know any of that at the time. So this process of unfolding my natural state of being is what made this happen. And it happens for people all the time, all over the world, that we have spiritual experiences, we have mediumship experiences. And so many of us have been taught, you know, we don't accept and receive it. But that one dream is what started it all, is started my path toward this shamanic practice
Yeah.
and accepting my own mediumship abilities.
So beautiful. So it actually officially kicked you off your awakening process, sort of, right?
Yes.
And then I know like 6 years after Justine passed away, your little boy, Jacob, also got the same type of leukemia.
Yes.
You want to continue that story a little bit?
Yes. And just to backtrack a little bit, one of the most pivotal times in the grief process, once that cracking open happened, was when I was sitting on sitting on the floor in my living room. We had just moved,
Hmm.
and Jacob was about 18 months old at that time. Dave and the girls were off at school, And I had this moment sitting on the floor with little Jacob toddling around and boxes and things to unpack. And the portrait of Justin was leaning against the wall.
Mm.
And I kept staring at him and because I didn't want to forget what he looked like. I couldn't take my eyes off that portrait. And, you know, I have this little guy walking around. And I was like, I had this thought. And I thought, I'm not going to love this baby.
Mm.
I'm not going to love him. I'll make it look good on the outside. I'll take care of him. I'll feed him. I'll clothe him. But I am never going to love this big again. It hurts too much. I refuse to do it. And all of a sudden, little Jacob crawled up onto my lap and he slapped me across the face as hard as he could. He just went pow across. Like really, like if you've ever had a little kid do that, like they'll headbutt you or they'll slap. And he was too young to talk. He could not form sentences. But I knew what he was saying to me. He grabbed my face. He made me make eye contact with him because I had not been I realized then I wasn't making eye contact with my own kid. This is what grief does. It can really separate you from joys in life.
Mm-hmm.
And he grabbed my face and I know what he said, he was saying, I'm here, love me. Aww. I'm here, mommy, I'm here, love me, love me. And I went, I was sort of stunned for a while, like what is happening right now? And then I thought, well, how could I possibly think this? Like all of a sudden I was aware of my thoughts. And prior to that, I didn't, these were pre-mindfulness days. Like I didn't have mindfulness training. I didn't have an awareness to pay attention to what I was thinking. I was just thinking. But in that moment, I realized I have a choice. I can choose to love this baby. This is all happening in my head. I can choose to love this baby all out, or I can withhold my love from him.
Mm.
I have a choice. I can choose love all out, or I can choose fear. Because the only reason I would withhold my love was for fear of pain, fear of living the same thing again.
Yes.
And in that moment, it all flooded in. I thought, oh my goodness, I have a choice. This is how grief is. It cracked me open to have these experiences. And now I have a choice. Every decision I make is eyes wide open.
Ooh, that's a lot. Oh my God, you got slapped by 18-year-old.
My little baby.
Oh my God.
And I'm just alone in my house, and I'm like, like, what's happening? And so I put my arms around him and I kissed him wildly, and I was sobbing and snot, messy cry, and I just rolled around on the floor with him and loved him. I thought, how nuts would it be to not enjoy this baby? But it is a choice. And so many people dealing and living with grief, it becomes your identity. And you feel like if I don't stay in a state of suffering, that somehow I'm forgetting the person who left.
Yeah.
And when you hold on to it that way, it will impede your life, and it will diminish your joy. And so this was one of those moments where I thought it actually choosing love brought me joy. It was the first time I felt a flicker of joy. And that was my biggest fear when Justin died, is that I would live without joy for the rest of my life, a joyless existence. Because I couldn't fathom ever feeling joy again with him gone. And this is how a lot of people are feeling right now, with so many losses and so much devastation that we're seeing, that it makes us feel like we'll never feel joy again.
Or
and that is not true.
If I feel joy, I feel a little bit guilt in me, that I feel like I'm going to forget that loss, sort of, right? So so my question is, what actually keep your heart continuously to stay open, even though you're going through that tumultuous, stories that it's devastating. It's devastating.
Yeah, it was. And I also had two beautiful little girls, when, they were starting junior high, and elementary school, and my husband was, we were all grieving together. And so I had a good, stable family life, as
Mhm.
far as about as stable as you can get in a crisis like that. We stayed together and we had our ups and downs, but I think having stability is key, to being able to even navigate with some kind of self-awareness and mindfulness, being mindful of what you're thinking, and also giving each other permission to grieve
Mm.
in their own way, in their own timeline. One day my husband would come home and he'd be, oh, I really miss Justin today. I feel so sad. And I was having an up day. And then I'd be like, oh, now I feel his grief made me cry more than my own grief. You know,
Right.
so it's a very delicate dance we do when we're in these states. And like I said, so many people are in a state of grief right now over so many things, personal things, people they love dying, and lost to COVID, and global issues and career issues. And there's so much to grieve right now that it's important that we're very gentle with ourselves and others through this process. We're
Mhm.
all being changed. There's no one on this planet that's not being affected by some aspect of what's going on right now. Everything's coming up to be looked at and seen. Are you looking at this situation with love or fear? Are you going to love through it, or are you going to fear through it? Ooh, see, that's really powerful.
Feeling so much right now while you're sharing, right? Wow. Okay. So definitely collective grieving that we're going through at the moment. Sometimes we're doing it unconsciously. We don't know we're grieving, but like you said, it's part of the stage that we're all navigating through. I can feel the energy.
I really felt that too.
Then going back to the story I was almost going to point it at about not Justin, after Justin passed away, and 6 years later, little Jacob, right?
Little Jacob,
Little Jacob
yes.
story.
So at that time, I was working for a nonprofit for children's cancer. I was the family outreach coordinator, and my job was to introduce families to the services we provided and run a grief support group and a family support group. And so I had really integrated the experience into my life. And as a nurse, it was a perfect place for me. I felt like I had done everything right. Like I've done the grief work. And by this time it's 4 years after Justin's passing. So it had been, and I was with them for a couple of years. Anyway, I'm at a family party that I had coordinated. It was an arcade night. We had it every year for the families who have kids with cancer, and also people who were in my bereavement group, and also in our regular support group. And so everyone was there at this arcade, skee ball and bumper boats and pizza and ice cream. And I get a call that Jacob has leukemia too. He'd had a cough and a low grade fever for about a week. And I took him in that morning to get his blood drawn. So the pediatrician was calling to tell me. And I was surrounded by kids with cancer in an arcade when I got this news. And I just could not wrap my mind around it. I couldn't. Jojo, my youngest daughter, was in a bumper boat out there, part of the group. And, it was so surreal that I literally I turned and I walked, scuttled my way out the door to see the sky. And I just collapsed on the grass. And I thought, I can't do this again. This is so unfair. I've done everything right. Why on earth? Is this some kind of joke, like cosmic cruelty? Like, I just couldn't wrap my mind around it. And yet the next day my husband and I were driving down Hollywood Freeway to Children's Hospital Los Angeles with our 6-year-old in the back seat, just as we had with our 5-year-old when Justin was first diagnosed, all those years before. So the thing I learned about this moment, is when you think about, had I had that moment when I had the fear versus love moment, when he slapped me across the face, if I hadn't chosen love, can you imagine the amount of guilt I would have felt at that moment of his
Oh, wow.
diagnosis and then potentially him dying, if I had withheld my love for my own son and
Mm,
then and had not loved him freely,
yeah.
this second diagnosis would have been it would have been so much harder,
Yeah.
so much harder. And this is how it is with life if we're not loving ourselves, especially ourselves through our lifetime
Mm,
and making discoveries and being gentle with ourselves and being gentle with others. We're not doing that when a crisis comes along. It's just like, a wave taking you out. It's never coming back. So I had another profound experience with Jacob in his experience as well, where he was on chemotherapy for he was 5 months into treatment, and leukemia treatments are long. For Justin, he was on chemo for 4 years, and Jacob was in his first of 3.5 years. So
yeah.
5 months in, hard chemo, bald, frail, very sick. He became toxic because of chemotherapy, which is exactly what caused Justin's
Yeah.
demise, was toxicity because of chemotherapy. So here's Jacob going through the same thing, and he starts having symptoms of bleeding out. His
Hmm.
lungs are starting to bleed. It's a condition called veno obstructive disease, VOD, and it leads to disseminated intravascular coagulation, or DIC,
I see.
which makes people bleed out. So here's little Jacob, 6 years old, starting to have all these symptoms: swollen, having difficulty breathing, bleeding out of his gums. And his beautiful, bright oncologist comes in and says, we need to talk. Sit down in the conference room no parent ever wants to be in. And he said if Jacob doesn't start urinating in the next 24 hours, that he's not likely to survive.
Oh, gosh.
So when I heard those words again, because we had heard them before, I I just got mad. And I walked out of the conference room. Dave went back to the room with Jacob. I walked down the hall at Children's Hospital LA, where this big floor to ceiling window, and I walked up all like stompy and crying and like and I looked out at this window, and it's huge, and I could see the Hollywood sign and Sunset Boulevard and cars buzzing and woman pushing a stroller and a man with a briefcase and all this life going on out there. And I just thought, what the hell am I doing in here again? I can't do this again. And I raised my fists to God and I said, quit picking on my boys.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think I said it out loud.
That's
And all of a sudden, I felt this sense of peace pour over me from the crown of my head to the bottom of my feet. And I knew that Jacob would live. I I knew it in my marrow, and literally felt it in my bones that this was true, that
wow.
he would live. And I stood there completely euphoric, and I didn't know what to do. I was crying one minute with my hands in the air, and the next I was all floaty, and I thought, how can I be blissed out while my son is potentially dying? It was very strange. And I just sort of floated back to his room. I didn't say anything to anyone. And I sat down quietly and I sat by his bed, just knowing that the tide would turn and he would live. And sure enough, 3 in the morning, he whispers, Papa, I have to pee pee. And he starts urinating, filling up we were, like relay racing the urinal, fill it, dump it all night. And we were like a pee pee relay team. And at one point, my husband held up the urinal, liquid gold, baby. So it was like a celebration all
Oh,
night. And
yeah.
the next morning, the medical team came in and they were shocked that Jacob had survived. They fully expected him to um, to transition through the night, to die.
So that was the inner knowing, right? I felt like that was the inner knowing in you, clear cognizance almost. You don't know why you knew, but
Yes,
it felt so reassured, right?
yes,
Reassurance of he is going to live. It's like grounded you to go back to face what you had to face.
yes. And also that connection to Justin on the other side that I did not recognize yet. At that point, I did not have that understanding of my shamanic gifts.
Yeah. When did you start connecting with Justin?
You know, but what's interesting about that feeling that I had, like you were saying, in my, it was literally in my bones. I didn't know what that was until I started studying plant medicine
Yeah.
and energy medicine. And I realize now that that's called the toric field. It exists within us and around us. It's part of our auric field.
Mhm.
Is this Taurus energy, this toric energy that can light batteries and buildings. And if we could harness it like we know, I believe it was Nikolai Tesla that first harnessed it in some way. And that form of energy that exists on the planet
Mm.
is what was lighting up for me in that moment. And it wasn't until I got past adjusting to Jacob and because he was still on, he got better and he did great, but he was still, we were in and out of the ER a bunch of times, probably 20 times, keeping him stable and alive. So this was not a one-time fix. It was, yes, he's living tonight, but you got to stay on your toes for the rest of this ride. So, but all of this stirring and, it put in me a sense of trust. I have I had a son on the other side at that time already. So this whole playground of feeling and claircognizance and clairsentience and all the clairs coming online. And it was, but I didn't have words for them. I didn't have names for them. And this was a long process. And I didn't even have the energy to even try to understand it. My focus was so much on raising my family. My girls were in high school and junior high by this time. We were in and out of the hospital with Jacob, so it was so anyone again watching this, if you're going through a crisis right now, write down your experiences. I always encourage people, write it down. If you're at the bedside of someone you love who is making their transition, listen to what they're saying. Listen very closely, right? Because they're entering into another state and they're saying things. And even if they have dementia, and if you're getting any clear messages from them that you feel resonate, write them down. Write it down, because you may not fully understand what they're saying now, but they may visit you in a dream or have some event after their transition that is intentionally, these are seeds that are planted so that you can understand after. And that certainly has happened for me. And so pay attention to your spiritual experiences and be gentle with yourself, be gentle with others, especially right now.
I'm just so grateful for you to share this. And part of me, while listening to your share, I'm like, wow, I feel liberated, because the part of me that's psychic and has been, hidden in the spiritual closet for so many years, like, talk about the woo-woo stuff and the clear audience, clear whatever. So, don't say a word, because I'm being surrounded, or, the family members are all very much scientific minded people. And so I'd be very watchful, kind of walk on my eggshells, But like you said, every single one of us, we are born psychic in a way, we are. It's just that we're not tuned in to that sensory system. And about the Taurus, the electromagnetic field, that we are already walking magnet here. We are conscious creators. At the same time, we are so afraid of our power. I think this is true, that we're going through like chaotic moments, yet once we realize, guess what, we're active participating here, then we get to create something else, right? But when we think, oh my God, why it happened to me, then I immediately cause myself stuck in the victim mode. And that's like a complete different story, of course.
Yeah, I think most of us experience the victim mentality at throughout our lifetimes in degrees. What brought me out of that, honestly, was a little girl named Elizabeth who was sick at the same time that Jacob was. And
Oh,
I knew her family and her from when I worked for the nonprofit in the cancer
mm,
world.
wow.
So when I brought Jacob into children's for his treatment and there was Elizabeth, we all of a sudden Jacob's a patient too. It was
Yeah.
very strange, but I already knew her and her family. And I just loved this little girl, 6 years old, who come into the clinic with butterfly wings and all very and a wand and boss everyone around. And she just really knew who she was. And she had a very rare form of pancreatic cancer.
Mm,
And when she went home on hospice care, her mother called me, and her mother is Emily, and she said, I can't do this. I don't know how to do this. And so I encouraged her to write everything down that Elizabeth says and pay attention to what pay attention to what she's saying. Really listen for those messages, like I had just suggested. And she did. She really listened. And so one day she called me and she said, I just have to tell you what Elizabeth said. And she said, I was holding her in my arms and I told her, Elizabeth, I'm so grateful for you that God gave you to me, my only daughter.
mm.
And Elizabeth looked up at me and said, me too, mommy. I had to wait such a long time for you.
Wow.
You feel that? It's so gorgeous. It's so deep. It resonates. It resonates so deep and true that what it meant for me was I was literally standing in my backyard with Jacob running around, still bald and frail, and feeling resentment that Justin had already succumbed to this disease, all the fear of trying to keep this one alive. But all of a sudden, because of Elizabeth, I realized that what she had just said was that she agreed to be Emily's daughter.
Right.
Emily agreed to be her mother, which meant I agreed to be Justin's mom and he agreed to be my son. And to
Mm,
have this leukemia experience was part of this, what I'm now call a soul plan. I didn't know to call it a soul plan then, but that feeling of truth, when truth lands in your body.
yeah.
And again, it's one of those marrow experiences. It wasn't as profound as the when I shared about Jacob, but it was deep in my bones understanding that this is what's going on here. Justin is a participant. And I say is because he still is a participant. He's just not in physical.
Mm,
So
mm.
those are the beginnings of understanding how this all works. And so when a child dies, they don't, and I saw this in children, and I saw lots of children who had made their transition, and they didn't act like victims. Very rarely, is usually not until their teens that they would be feeling sorry for themselves or
Right.
manifest, showing signs of like being, just a lot of anger and frustration, like we do as adults. It's
Mm,
not fair. And, little kids, they just do it. They take their medicine, they take their treatment, and they go back to the playroom and play. And they don't have that, adult mindset yet. So they don't see themselves as victims. They don't know there's any other way than this. Well, of course, I have, like, okay, I'm in the playroom and here's my IV and I'm waiting for the nurse. And okay, then we're done. Now let's go back to playing. And it was such a great truth for us to understand that we are not victims of the things that happen in our life. And I know that could be really make people angry because terrible things happen. And if you've been the victim of a violent act from somebody, something intentional that someone else has done,
mm.
or an accident, those are really hard things to wrap your mind around because you didn't want it to happen. Nobody wants those things to happen in this life. But when you look at the opportunities to love past the fear and the anger and the resentment, that's where the soul plan comes in. And you think all the lives that you see it happen all the time, all the lives that are touched by somebody that experienced tragedy. And, you know, our loved ones come in knowing that we're going to serve them in this way or that way. and direct each other. And it's really a beautiful dance if you can sit back and look at it in that way without attaching to the outcome of everything having to be the way you think it should be. So
Mm.
it was Elizabeth that taught me that. I did not read that in a self-help book because I didn't start reading self-help books yet. So
Yeah, you know the term we all call soulmates, right? Oh yeah, where's my soulmates? But then I really feel like, soulmate is pretty much a soul, because we're all souls, we're all in this reincarnated physical body, right? We're walking souls on earth, but at the same time, we're each other's soulmates to, walk each other home. And walk each other home sometimes brings some tumultuous moments, like the one you had with Justin and Jacob, part of his life, right? But
yeah,
he's 21 now and he's really healthy.
yeah, Jacob. Actually, he just turned 22 last week.
Oh, happy
Yeah,
birthday.
yeah. He's
Yeah.
got long hair and a beard. He looks like
Oh,
Jesus. He's a cool dude. He's like, I always tell him, would you like to meet my son Jesus? And he smiles all day. Like,
yeah. Like you said earlier, Justin and Jacob and other beautiful babies, souls, like the children you met, you helped, they're all soulmates in your life, for example. Right?
absolutely. Yes.
Because I think you also talked about something regarding miracles. I want to talk about that. Miracles manifested through people, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I've had such amazing experiences with healthcare professionals of taking care of
Mm.
my kids and me and my husband too. And being a nurse and coming from a hospital background, I have a great fondness and compassion for them, especially now with COVID and the major stresses that our healthcare teams are under.
Mm.
Very, very
Sure.
challenging for them.
Sure.
But when I say that miracles manifest through people, I relate it back to that time when Jacob got well, in that miracle, that moment when I had that feeling of peace, and I floated back to his room and he got better that night. Well, that night the ICU was full. The pediatric ICU was full. So
Mhm.
he should have been in ICU, but they had no beds.
Yeah.
So the people who showed up to work that day had to become intensive care unit professionals. And I have been that nurse. I have been the nurse in a situation that becomes critical on a regular acute care floor. So I know that feeling of how scary that is, because
Mhm.
you have to up level your skill set and rely on your team like you never have before. And that's exactly what happened when Jacob was being cared for. The intensivist was running up and down the stairs to check on him, and the clerk was orders were flying, hanging blood checking, and the nurses running in and out and calling in extra staff. And it was a long night for them. It was a long night for them. And so when the team came in the morning and they thought everything was mislabeled, I said, we got our miracle. You guys did it. We got our miracle, and that miracle manifested through real people who
Mm.
showed up to do their work. Those people got up in the morning and they said, oh, clocking in at 7, or, my 12-hour shift. This is what we do in our day-to-day life. We just go about our business.
Yeah.
But what happened for me that day was a critical change in perception. So I got my spiritual experience miracle, as well as watching and like it's like I put on glasses. I could see what was going on. Wow, look at this team. Look at how it's all working. And I had Justin's experience to compare that to, because they did the same thing. They all gave it their best.
Mm.
There was no, you know, they gave Justin the same. Those people showed up to save Justin, just like they did to save Jacob. And so it was like a veil had lifted for my perceptual ability to say, this has nothing to do with anybody working here. And it has everything to do with everybody working here,
Yeah.
because their presence is what's carrying out the story. This is what's happening. And it's all in agreement with the person in the bed. It's all in agreement with the patient. If just if Jacob's soul had agreed to depart that day, he'd be gone. You know, so and so I see miracles in all this. I see the practical, like the visual, the visible miracle that the team had of seeing Jacob recover and miracle, yes, but the invisible miracle where there's such a profound change in perception that
Mm.
it affects you your for the rest of your life. And so both of those things played out in my experience that day.
I, I just totally love this because sometimes we say, oh, miracles, miracles around you, but then we never really see it in like, oh, you know what? There are visible miracles and there are invisible ones are the spiritual ones, right? And those I have experienced personally many times of my life. That really shift my perspective, the way I look at my current life, you know? And the visible one is like wearing that miracle glasses, like, holy cow, everyone is making miracles happening, you know? It's profound. It is profound. Wow.
It really is. And we're designed this way. That's what I love is that like we're wired for this kind of receptivity.
Yes. Yes. So Lisa, because I know you being a nurse and you're working with health professionals, even though I'm not in the arena, but my father, he used to be a physician. He was working, you know, in the private clinical practice for more than 40 years. And well, he just shut down our little clinic called Compassion Radiance. But anyway, that's another story. But definitely I can empathize like what's been going on during the pandemic for the front line. There must be so much stress, so much fear, right? And what would you suggest or give a piece of advice for people in general, of course, like health professionals, that's who you are working with, but in general, how do we release fear so we are able to connect with that courageous part of us within, so we can trust more in the total like unpredictability of what this life is trying to offer us, rather than, oh my God, we're being kind of like, you know, the victim of life because we don't know what's going to happen to us again, but more as that active participant of, wow, you know, we're dancing with life instead of, wow, what's going to happen to me, you know? Like, what is your one piece of advice?
Well, there's the way I was able to stay sane in some of these processes was I remember one time Jacob was having a very difficult procedure. It was after his survival and he had long-term treatment. And they were
Yeah.
having trouble accessing his port because he had an IV under his skin to give him chemo. And it was one of those days where I just did not want to see my kid poked again with needles. And, you know, and it was, I had to step out of the room because I knew I was not contributing to him staying strong
Yeah.
because I was going to start crying. And I thought, if I start losing it, I'm not doing him any good. So I said, I'm taking a break. Everybody take a pause. And I went into the bathroom and I literally wedged my face in the corner of the bathroom stall because it was an end stall. It did it instinctually. I didn't plan on doing that. I had to ground myself on something and it was this big, you know, cinder block wall. Didn't
Wow.
realize that's what I was doing. But putting my face in a corner like this, and it gave me a chance to go do this, right? Like just separate yourself from what's going on. And then all of a sudden, this scripture flooded into my memory. And I used to have a lot of biblical scripture memorized. But
Yeah.
when Justin made his transition, I lost all of that. It's very common in a traumatic loss to lose memory. And I lost all of it. I couldn't recall any of the scriptures that I had memorized all those years. But in that moment, when I put myself in the corner and in desperation, this one scripture landed, and it was, He has not given us a spirit of fear, but of love and of power and a sound mind. Oh, you feel that right now? It's so big.
Wow.
And it's so true. We have not been given a spirit of fear.
Mm,
We have been given a spirit of love
mm.
and of peace and a sound mind. So, how many of us need to hear that right now, every day?
Every day, yes, every day.
Every 5 minutes lately, something's burning, something's flooding, something's being withheld, something's being given. Like, it's just intense. And
Uh,
so, that when you can create a mantra for yourself, words that can help you align with your grounded, stable, tethered to earth, linked to heaven
mm,
self. When you can presence yourself in that, that's part of our spiritual practice. To have those tools on the ready for a crisis so that we aren't being knocked around like pinballs. We can say, I have a steady mind. I have not been given a spirit of fear. Fear, you are not welcome here.
mm.
I choose to see this through a lens of love. That doesn't mean being a doormat or being passive. It means I will be the most loving person I can be in this situation. Does that mean taking action and providing service to someone or retreating and protecting myself and my loved ones? Whatever it is, it's just it takes you out of the victim mentality of everything's happening to me and realizing that everything's happening to everybody. Everything's happening to everybody. It's all in degrees. And stop comparing yourself to other people. And being in victim mentality will make you compare yourself to everyone around you, and you will never feel like a participant. You just feel like everything bad's happening to you.
Yeah.
And it does become a choice. It does become a choice. And especially if you're in this paradigm, this living paradigm right now of awakening to our spiritual receptivity, to our spiritual sovereignty
Mm.
as human beings, if you're waking up to that, then put these spiritual practices into place and own them. We need it. We need each other right now more than ever to not go to victim mode and us versus them. That's not what we're about.
This is so good. And I just want to say something that you shared earlier, mantra, right? Have that personal mantra. And guess what? We're in this technologically advanced world right now. Set up the mantra in
Yeah.
your alarm every 5, 10, 15 minutes, or however you want it to just kind of remind you like, oh yeah, I am safe. Am I safe? I am safe. Yeah.
Thank you for that. Yes, that's true. And all the wonderful things we can say to ourselves.
Mm,
I'm abundant. I am love. I am I am sovereign. I just love that word.
yeah.
I am, right now as countries are feeling unstable, no matter what happens, we are our own sovereign being. No
Mhm.
one no one can take that away.
And all is well.
And all is well.
All is well.
That simple, all is well. Whoosh. You know?
And I just want to say thank you so much for demonstrating that, because not only through your personal story, that tumultuous moments of, loss, and going through, the moments of Jacob's once again the same experience as Justin, right? It's really taking a lot of inner strength, a lot of faith, even though, at times we feel like we're almost falling over the verge of not trusting, right? And your strength of continue to believe and knowing that wherever we are, there's that something that we don't see because we rely on our physical eyes too much sometimes. This path I really learned is to trust more of what I don't see rather than what I see.
Isn't that the truth? Yes.
Personal experience. And just allow ourselves to lean in to the moment of unknown it takes practice, right? It's like, it's not like, oh yeah, I totally distrust, what I've been experiencing till this time, and you want me to just trust the next second of my life? Probably not. But then it takes time, right? One step at a time, lean in and say, guess what? I'm still breathing right here. Everything's well. And why don't I try to not even try? Why don't I just choose to believe that everything is going well for the next moment, only the next moment? Don't even think too much about 2 years, 5 years later.
It's so true. And I heard a story recently that you just reminded me of, that even at last breath, we can say all is well. It was a practitioner friend of mine, spiritual practitioner, who had a friend who passed very suddenly.
Yeah.
Not from COVID, just a young woman in her 40s.
Okay.
And she had heart failure. And she, at her last words were, "I choose joy."
That's the last words.
Her last words. As she was making her transition and people surrounded her, she said, "I choose joy." Whoa.
Wow.
Right? To have the presence of mind to say, "I choose joy" at last breath is definitely something I hope to attain. That when it comes to my last breath, that I will be able to say, "I choose joy."
Same here.
That even in the transition, because there's no other way out. We all, every single one of us will have, just as we had first breath, we will have last breath. And I love that people are waking up more and more. Young people are embracing spiritual practices and understanding. I did a session, a guided energy medicine alignment today with a young man that was astounding. They're so awake, and their spiritual receptivity is so much greater than mine was at their age, and it's happening. We're flowing together more gently, and the more we can accept joy into our life. And there's a scripture that we have on Justin's headstone.
Oh.
We didn't know what to put on his stone, his marker. And again, this was 20 years ago, when we were definitely we were surrounded by very beautiful people in our church who helped support us and get us through this. And it was our pastor who suggested we put this scripture, and I'm so glad he did, because it still serves us well. But it's Jesus telling the disciples, and he says that you too now have sorrow, but I will see you again, and no one takes your joy away from you. And that last part about, I'll see you again. I know you're in sorrow. I'll see you again, and no one takes your joy away from you.
Yeah.
I know what that means now. I really do. I know what that means. And it's true. You can give your joy away to someone else. You can give your joy away to fear, doubt, and worry all day long. All day long. Here you go. There goes my joy. I'm going to stay on my phone and watch a little more tragedy. Or you can nurture your joy, bringing it in and restoring it. Go outside, look at the sunrise, the sunset, listen to the birds chirp, feel your own breath, the breath of life filling your lungs and animating you. Go watch the ants. Go watch a bunch of ants do their thing. There's so many things to be joyful over.
And I think, what comes really true to me is that linking to that word breath, right? We're not entitled to anything, not what we do here, not what we say, not what we have done, but then we're entitled to breath. even though, pandemic may make you feel like you're going to lose your breath at one time, but still like, wow, the fact that we're still breathing, what a joy. Can we celebrate more that I'm alive? Doesn't matter what happens. You might go through your ups and downs, right? But the fact that you're still breathing, you're alive, and this is a part of us, needs to be more celebratory,
Yeah, and it's been very pounded. It's been a challenging couple of years now. And again, I feel for young people because they, when you're 15, 16, they don't know any different. Like this experience is unprecedented. And, when I was their age, 18, 19, I wasn't thinking about anything about the world. All I knew was myself and my own stuff,
Same here.
Yeah. So we're thankful for I tried to encourage them that participants in them
Yeah.
agreed to be born at this time because they do have the gifts and receptivity and the power to be the people they want to be and to make a difference in the world. And all of us do, or we wouldn't be here.
Oh, I'm so grateful for you to just wrap it all up with, I just feel like that self-leadership is what we're talking about here, right? Mm-hmm. Leadership is not just like a word from the dictionary or how we're being brainwashed in that way about what leadership look like. But leadership, it's about how do we lead ourselves so we can feel more joy, so we can put our miracle glasses on when we feel like we're in, I don't know, when we feel down. Can we still allow ourselves to trust a little bit more than yesterday? Mm-hmm. That takes leadership, I feel.
It does. And if you can't lead yourself, you cannot lead others well. You can lead others. You probably won't lead them well.
Yeah.
So all of these compounds, all these stories that compile in our life and lead us to these understandings, if we can integrate wisdom, because through those, look at what's seeking to emerge in every circumstance. Look for the wisdom that you learn from it, what's coming out of the experience. And from a participant mentality with some love shine on there, it makes it a lot easier to go through it. And then to be able to lead yourself with the light on.
Yeah.
And just simply being that.
And also no perfectionism, right? No perfectionism. We're here to commit into this intention of really hone into our intuition and less head chatters, right? And allow ourselves to ground every day and allow ourselves to not give our joy away, tossing them around to other people, right? And not to blame, not to criticize or to judge ourselves as well as others, of course.
Yeah. And to be aware of what's going on, sometimes we shut our bodies down too. We're all in knots, our chest hurts and our stomach hurts. And that's another way of protecting ourselves and taking on the woes of the world. But again, the body is a vessel, it's our vehicle of navigating this lifetime. So if you're feeling that if people are feeling the intensity of that physically, then it needs to be moved out, it needs to be cleared out. And guided energy is one way to do that. Guided energy medicine, that's what I love about it, is that people can lay down, relax. It's all on Zoom, and I can scan their energy. I know you know this because you do it too. We've had a beautiful guided energy medicine exchange between us. And this is the beautiful thing about this practice. You're in New Zealand. No, New Zealand.
New Zealand. Yes.
You're in New Zealand. The first time we did an exchange, you were in Taiwan.
I know.
I'm in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
And we can have this beautiful energy exchange to help us through times like this, where we can move the energy out of the body and we can make discoveries that both participants make the discoveries that come up in the imageries in the mind and the the sensations in the body, and then we talk about it, and
Yes.
all these even more miracles happen, changes in perception. You know, it's a beautiful practice. And if I feel like if everybody could just do a gem session a day, the world would be a better place and we'd all be a lot healthier too.
For sure. So I'm so grateful of you for your beautiful presence, Lisa, and your genuine share about all the powerful like experiences that you had. It's not only to say how strong you were, traversing those difficulties, but how much I admire you for your faith, and how open you are to really allow the divine guidance to just pour through you, and you trust that, and you trusted that. You can choose not to trust it, but you trusted that. And those are skills, I would say. Those are skills, and also inner strength to continue to lean into that unknown, So I am just so happy that you're here to share those gems with everyone here. Oh my gosh.
Thank you. It's so kind of you to invite me, and I always enjoy our conversations. And
Yeah, and for everyone who's listening here, if you're going through anything that's like, causing you a lot of fears, knowing that what Lisa just said, just put on your miracle glasses for a while and see, you probably don't see what you didn't notice, get your perspective shifted and allow more miracles to come, because we're here not to suffer. I think we're here to learn how to be alchemists, learn to, transmute those pains to gold, They're literally gold. And so, Lisa, thank you so much for your gems, for your beautiful wisdom, always. And I want to thank you, Justin. You're there.
yes, all our spirit teams. And
Yeah.
definitely we all have them.
And thank you for all that you do for the health care, the professionals, but because they all need to learn how to release all those stress, the burnout, and trust more when they're just doing all the service in the front line.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for shining your light.
Thank you. Thank you for giving me the opportunity, and we can all commit to keep each other in prayer and uplift, in a state of uplift.
For sure.
Going through these times together.
Yeah. So we commit to the intent of trusting, and recommit if we happen to fail to commit. Yeah, and more laughters to joy.
Yes.
Joy.
Yes.
Yeah.
Let the joy in as much as possible. Yes. Thank you so much for having me.
So much, Lisa. Thank you everyone for watching. And this is beautiful Lisa DeLong. Feel free to connect with her. I'll provide you the way.
Yeah. I have a new website. I just finished it.
Yay. Okay. Give it to me.
thejoyfulshaman.com.
Cool.
Thejoyfulshaman.com. My name, Lisa Solis DeLong, is there. So yeah. I have a friend that calls me that, so that's how it happened, and it's stuck. I like it.
Yes. Okay. So this is Joyful Shaman Lisa DeLong here, and then feel free to connect with her. Her beautiful energy. I'm so just grateful for your presence.
You too. Thank you so much for making this happen. I appreciate it. You made my day.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, everyone. Talk to you soon.
See you next time. Bye.